Hi, my name is Aaron Sperber, and this is my case study for EDL 851. The case, the facts of the case, the principal is completing evaluations, and the principal has a teacher, Mrs. Stevens, who has been having some difficulty whenever he observes her. Her classes seem to have low engagement. Sometimes she has difficulty with pupil control. Um, the students don't seem to always respect her. They don't openly defy her, but they don't seem to have a lot of respect for her and don't seem really engaged. She does have excellent content knowledge, but she's struggling in those areas. On Thursday of that week, the principal met with Mrs. Stevens for a post-visitation conference. And during that conference, she seemed irritated, a little agitated, did not want to really take suggestions from the principal and was difficult to communicate with. When Mrs. Stevens left conference, the principal felt like there was no progress that had been made to her working to improve her teaching. Continuing the facts of the case, the principal then decided to visit Mrs. Stevens' classroom again the following Monday, and once again during the observation there was no noticeable improvement. Still struggled with engagement, and the principal witnessed that the teacher was lecturing too much and that there was not enough student-led learning, students participating during class. That afternoon, the principal completed Mrs. Stevens' evaluation, and he marked her as below average on personality, professional interest and attitude, and teaching ability. And he decided to recommend that she not be renewed. He knew that if he did recommend her to be renewed, that she would receive tenure, and then that would be a whole nother issue. The following afternoon, the principal and Ms. Stevens met and went over her evaluation. And once again, Ms. Stevens seemed to be kind of irritable. He showed her the evaluation. She called it unfair and inaccurate. She stated that she struggles when people are in the back of the room observing, that upsets her, and it also affects the behavior of the students. And so that was kind of her excuse for that. And she also claimed that she had an unfair evaluation because the principal had not taught her classes before, so the principal could not know what all went into teaching that type of class. She also was very upset with the principal and her supervisor. She felt like they had not offered her any ideas for improving her teaching. And she also said that she believed that the principal's supervision had not been helpful, that she had not received a fair evaluation, and she did not accept responsibility for her failings as a teacher. And she said that her supervision was to blame for her failings, not her. Finally, she stated that she would take legal action if she had to, depending on what the principal turned in for her evaluation. And as far as legal issues go, the state of Kansas has allowed teachers to be dismissed without cause, without explanation. That law has been backed up a couple times by Kansas Supreme Court decisions, and so that is in place there. And then for my district policy, Stanton County USD 452. These are direct quotes from that policy. The building principal has responsibility to supervise all classified staff members who are assigned to the building, and that all classified employees are employed at will basis, regardless of their length of service, and may be dismissed at any time. So you have the Kansas law and the district policy that kind of support, hey, you can be let go for any reason at any time. What happened? Basically, when you break it down, the teacher, Mrs. Stevens, has threatened to seek legal action after losing her job and has called into question the principal's supervision and evaluation practices. And so that is basically the situation at hand. Section 4, synthesize the facts. So the people that are involved, what we know about them, we know that the principal has some experience within the school because we know that the principal's already been through at least one hiring period because it talked about the principal hiring teachers and being pretty satisfied with his hires so far. And then also we know Mrs. Stevens, the teacher, can be irritable and she doesn't seem to want to take responsibility for herself and for her teaching, or really not real susceptible to constructive criticism. And then we also know that the other teachers that the principal has hired have been doing fairly well. He's happy with their performance. So unknowns when it comes to people. We don't know the people in Mrs. Stevens' class. We don't know kind of the subgroups as far as ESL, at-risk, students with IEPs, things of that nature, their backgrounds, do they have support at home, things like that. So we don't know very much at all about the students in her class. We don't know how they've tested and things like that. We also don't know who Mrs. Stevens' supervisor is. She references a supervisor other than the principal, but we don't know who that is. We also do not know the superintendent, what their policies are as far as evaluation and what they believe and their input on the evaluation process. Places. We know the place where the observations and conferences took place was at the school. And we also can tell that there's not a truly collaborative culture at this school because clearly Mrs. Stevens is not open to collaboration. So they don't have total collaboration at the school at this time. We also do not know the physical conditions of the teacher's classroom, and we do not know the area the school is in, whether it's in a impoverished area, high socioeconomic area, what the community demographics are, or anything like that. And then finally, as far as programs go, we know what is being evaluated. We can see the evaluation form. We do not know the curriculum being used, what grade level Mrs. Stevens teaches, or if this is a private or public school. Reviewing the information, we are looking at a situation where the school could incur legal costs from a lawsuit. And who has a stake in this outcome? Obviously, Mrs. Stevens does. She could lose her job if the principal recommends to not renew her contract. The principal could come under scrutiny about his evaluation practices if she takes this farther, takes this to the superintendent, the board, and maybe to the courts. And then also, students, obviously, their outcomes are at stake as well because they are potentially looking at having an ineffective teacher, which could negatively impact their learning. All relative stakeholders have not been consulted. The principal has yet to talk to the superintendent or the board about their decision, and they don't really, as far as we know, have any knowledge of Mrs. Stevens. And then also, the principal has not spoken with her supervisor, as far as we know. So can we learn more? Yes, definitely. So we can figure out information, talk to Mrs. Stevens' supervisor, and we can also try and see her test scores as far as her students' test scores, whether that's pre and post tests, standardized tests, to gain more data on her teaching from that angle. But I think you do know enough to make a decision. So possible options. Option 1, the principal, that in this case being me, can continue on the current course and just recommend that Mrs. Stevens' contract is not renewed. And then therefore Mrs. Stevens will no longer have a job. which could open up the school and or the principal to be sued by Mrs. Stevens, despite what I talked about earlier as far as the lack of legal precedent for that. Option 2, the principal can recommend that Mrs. Stevens' contract be renewed, and then allow her to reach tenure, and then try and work with Mrs. Stevens and improve her professional learning. Provide her with a mentor to help facilitate that. Have that mentor perform informal observations, and then meet and discuss how she can improve, and do that on a regular basis. Partner Mrs. Stevens with a highly effective teacher in the same subject area, and have her team teach some courses that you could do that as well to help bring her along, mentor her. Let her see a highly effective teacher in action. Maybe every day, every other day, and then provide Mrs. Stevens with feedback on a much more regular basis as well to help facilitate that improvement that needs to happen with her. And then option 3 is kind of a middle ground. So you can remind Mrs. Stevens that state law and district policy allow the school to dismiss teachers with or without cause. You can allow her to have another evaluation where maybe she can place a camera in the back of the class and record, so she's not so uneasy, rather than have the principal back there, and then take that recording and look it over with separately from her supervisor, and have the principal and the supervisor, come up with their own conclusions, and then compare notes on the observations, and then also pull the performance-based assessment data to look at, okay, how much of an effect, a positive effect, is she having on her students as well, and then go through after that and make your recommendation whether to renew or not, looking at all that new data and observation points. And then after that, overhaul the school evaluation and supervision policies and practices in order to help develop current and future teachers in the profession in order to facilitate school improvement and student success. Section 7, evaluate the options. So for the first option, really the pros of this option is the principal will not have to work with the teacher anymore. So the teacher we talked about is not always open to improvement, not open to criticism, so it can be difficult to work with in that sense. So that would help if you just say, okay, don't renew her contract. Mrs. Stevens will hopefully be replaced with a more effective teacher that he can kind of hand pick, and thus you'll have students' achievement improve. Some cons: the school and principal could be sued by Mrs. Stevens despite there being little to no legal recourse that will provide a remedy to Mrs. Stevens according to state law. And then also you have the principal's evaluation and supervision practices. They could be called into question by Mrs. Stevens and brought to the attention of the superintendent and the school board. And then you could also, you're not really fixing any future issues that could come up dealing with supervision or evaluation and trying to improve teachers and make them better teachers. For the second option, the pros are the school and principal, they will not have to worry about Mrs. Stevens taking legal action because she'll still be employed by the school. The principal will get an opportunity to help Mrs. Stevens become a more effective teacher, and that's the ultimate goal is to help teachers become better teachers, to improve the profession overall, so we can help our students learn. And then the principal does not have to find a new teacher and replace Mrs. Stevens, which can be time consuming and can cost a lot of money potentially in recruitment. And then the cons: Mrs. Stevens' poor growth mindset could be a detriment to the school culture, could keep them from continuing to improve that culture to being a collaborative, professional learning based culture, and her students' learning could suffer if she is not able to capitalize on her opportunities and improve as a teacher. So that's